past several days, I've rewatched the Remastered Beatles Anthology, the 2025 version, several times. So evidently I really like it. Or actually, I love it. And it reminds me of several things that, that I forgot. I love the new stuff that's in there too. And it also something kind of came up for me with it. Something that I probably overlooked originally that I hadn't really thought of before until I see episode 9. And I guess I'm in pretty good company because, even those guys, Paul, George, and Ringo, when they're doing the anthology, they're looking back and they forgot about a lot of stuff. And for me, what was kind of missing was kind of like a good ending to the original anthology. So we had episodes 1 through 8, and we all know it's not going to have the best ending because, the Beatles are going to break up. But it really dawned on me this time that episode 8 ends kind of unsatisfactorily. I'm left with kind of hanging somewhat. It's like, okay, what happens next? I don't know. I don't know about you, but that's how I felt about it. And then I see episode 9. And with episode 9, they give us something, or they give me something anyway, that I didn't even know I was wanting or needing. And what they give me is sort of an epilogue to the Beatles story. And of course, in real life, we all know the epilogue. We know they had their fussing and feuding and fighting, and they all get on the same page and yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's exactly what happens. But with this thing here, you kind of see a transformed Paul, George, and Ringo, because you compare the Paul, George, and Ringo that show up, in the later interviews to the Paul, George, and Ringo in those earlier interviews. And they're not quite exactly two different, they're not exactly two different people, but they're very different. There's a noticeable difference, at least for me anyway. Like with Paul. Paul in the earlier interviews, definitely, he's very powerful, very upbeat, and very funny. But in the latter interviews, he's also very grounded and looser, and just more authentic. For me, a lot more relatable. And with George originally, he's very jokey and loving, but, all of them are actually keeping you at a little bit of an arm's length. And I don't blame them. Okay, I really don't. But with the latter George, he's still kind of funny, but not as jokey. He's a lot more philosophical, a lot more down to earth as well, and even more loving. I'm really feeling George. And he's also absolutely gorgeous, by the way. I mean, they're all gorgeous. What am I saying? And Ringo is definitely Ringo. I mean, what can we say about Ringo? He's very funny and open and steady and loving, and he's just there for all of us. That's Ringo. But with this Ringo in the latter interviews, he kind of turns into this elder statesman, and he's knocking Paul and George's head together. And I absolutely love it. So here I am looking at this, and they seem a little bit more human, just like 3 regular guys there. And you know what? It's not just 3. We also see the home movies of John with the episode 9. So we're seeing a happy at home John Lennon, and it kind of gives you that feeling like, okay, he was fine. He was just fine. And the same thing with Paul, George, and Ringo. When the wives show up in that room. And, I've seen the wives with Paul, George, and Ringo many times. Okay, hello, duh, I know they've been married. We all know that. But for some reason, when they walk into that room and they're all kind of hugging each other and giving the little kisses, it seems so very homey, so very down to earth, so everyday. It's just like your friends next door when everybody gets together to party and you greet each other. This is what everybody does. And I'm so stupid, maybe I sound dumb, but kind of humanize them. And they are just, going, okay, these 4 guys, they're just guys after all. And they all just get together and they're playing music. And they kind of love each other. But first and foremost, this episode 9, of course, it humanizes them, but it reminds us that John, Paul, George, and Ringo, they're John, Paul, George, and Ringo, not necessarily the Beatles. I think that they were trying to, obviously take control of their story, tell a story in their own words, and that's perfectly fine. Whatever they want to say, I love it. I don't care. I dig it. And obviously they're not telling us everything, and that's not their job, okay? That's fine if they want to keep us at arm's length, because I think that that is how they kind of preserve, their humanity, okay, and their sanity, basically. So that's fine. So I'll take whatever they want to tell us. So this is probably why I'm sitting here reading between the lines, what are they doing? What are they saying? So, you notice stuff. And so, Anthology, yeah, they set out to tell their own story, etc. But what was evident here during Anthology, during the episodes 1 through 9, and definitely, see episode 9, the original episodes 1 through 8, yeah, you see a little bit of that. You see them kind of getting more on the same page, comparing notes and getting together, being very casual with everything and jokey and kind of relaxing by the end of episode 8. And it's nice, okay, but it's unsatisfying. They're almost kind of like, it's like, okay, they're, how people on the screen, they're about ready to kiss, okay, and then it cuts away. That's what it was like for me with episode 8. But episode 9, they embrace. And all is well, and they fall in love. And to me, it's like episode 9 shows us that they live happily ever after. Because with episode 9, you see you kind of see their humanity. You see that they are actually putting things to bed. They're getting together in the studio, probably reliving the loss of John and experiencing that, as the Threedles. And grieving in their own way, doing that little ritual with the chair, which I do not think that was any kind of an act or putting on for the camera. I don't think so. I think that was probably a toned down thing. I think they'd probably already kind of fell apart before that we're never, ever going to see, okay? Like Paul said, Ringo, bring your tissues, man, because most likely Paul had to go through a whole carton of them, okay? And probably George as well. Because again, remember that what George said there, it would have been great, for John to have experienced what they'd experienced, where, yeah, maybe they thought that they had, a lot of wonder under the bridge by, the early 90s. Maybe they thought everything was okay and everything was cool. But George was just confirmed that this was an experience for them. And yeah, he just said it pretty basically. He just said, yeah, we experienced this, we put it to bed, and I wish that John had experienced this too. Is probably a huge understatement. Again, what makes me think of them all kind of getting on the same page and kind of getting back together, putting some old, hurts aside and remembering who they are. They're not the Beatles, okay? They are, but that is back here. So with Anthology, a byproduct of doing that was them kind of putting everything in perspective, putting that behind them. Okay, we're not the Beatles and we're cool being ex-Beatles now. We love each other. And that kind of comes forward for them. They can get rid of old, probably you're not going to get rid of all the old grudges and the old wounds, but maybe you can kind of, maybe they're not so big. Maybe so. And to me, that was apparent in the latter 90s that, that they just embraced they felt freer to embrace and actually promote and celebrate being Beatles. And when I say the latter 90s, I'm also including George in that because George did the same thing. And of course, now Paul and Ringo are embracing the Beatles. They love being Beatles, etc. But first and foremost, they are Paul and Ringo. They're Paul and Ringo, but happy to be Beatles. So they're doing it right. They put everything to bed there. And I think, like I said, that was a byproduct, in my opinion, of doing the anthology. And I just can't imagine all the stuff that went on behind the scenes. And again, like I said, I know it sounds dumb that they were kind of more humanized for me, but maybe it was necessary. Maybe that was the point. I don't know. It probably wasn't their point. I think it was just like a byproduct, and they're just now figuring out that this is what happened, and we're just now figuring it out what happened. So if you ask Paul and Ringo now, it's like, hey, did you mean to be all humanized and humanize yourself for your fans? They're going to say, what the hell are you talking about, man? That is not where we were at, man. We just wanted to make a little bit of money, tell our story, sing a couple songs, kind of honor John, be Beatles and play Beatle for a while, and move on. And they did all that, yada, yada. But like I said, I feel like that was, they just kind of left us hanging there with episode 8. All right. They didn't show us all of that, all the stuff they went through. They didn't really show us in the right way, like episode 9 does, that, that when they got to, they were cooler with each other by the end of it. Yeah, we probably saw some pictures and maybe some of us, had an idea about it. But I really think now that it's spelled out for us that that is actually what happened. And they were able to, move on from everything. Because you can tell with episodes 1 through 8 that they had a love-hate relationship with being the Beatles. And it must have been difficult to come back in the studio. And they did it with grace and love. And they rose above all that crap. And you can see that there. And it transformed them into like the earlier Paul, George, and Ringo, like going into the studio and kind of, probably with some trepidations, getting together and talking about it, probably a little bit stiff. And you can see that. But then you can see in episode 9, they kind of give us a peek at these guys who were a lot softer, a lot more loving, and had that dynamic with each other that maybe they didn't want to show us. I don't know why they didn't want to say, hey, we're human. Maybe they wanted to say, hey, we're Beatles. Okay, we want you to see us as Beatles, and we're just going to move on and be Paul, George, and Ringo. But like I said, with episode 9 there, just humanizes them for me. And you can also see with that episode 9 what they do, or with all the anthology, all the episodes there, I think they're focusing now on telling the story that the Beatles, were the Beatles. That happened. Now they're John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And that's wonderful. And that's the most important thing. And I think that that is also emphasized, too, by that end screen there in loving memory of John and George. So when I saw that, I go, oh, yeah. So, because we can tend to think of those guys as just like myths or superhuman people, that they're indestructible. But no, they were not indestructible. They were humans, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, handle with care. And so I think with the addition of that end screen the addition of episode 9, where you see these as just your regular guys, which, they're just 4 guys who made it, very, very big. Okay. It's perfect. So we can see that now, plus with that end screen, you can see like the focus with maybe the powers that be, maybe that was their idea. I don't know. But whatever's going on, I like this story. I like this epilogue. I like how it all feels now. It's got a happy ending now for me anyway. It really does. I don't know about you, but yeah, it's a bit of a tearjerker. Yeah, maybe I'm making too much of it, but I don't care. This is just how I feel about it.
It's brilliant.
So whoever's behind that episode 9, thank you very much. I love it. And thank you all so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. And until next time, peace and love one another. Take care.
Beatles is Beatles are Beatle. In the end, it's like, oh, sod off with the Beatles,